Hello, I'm Emma-Louise Coffey and you're welcome to the Dairy Edge, the Teagasc Dairy podcast. We're bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve dairy farm performance. With the spotlight on agriculture and a pressure to reduce emissions, soil scientist David Wall joins us on this week's episode to explain the benefits of Protected Urea to reduce ammonia and greenhouse gas emissions while maintaining the same level of grass productivity at farm level.
We have urea, we have calcium ammonium nitrate, which are tried and tested, and most farmers use those fertilizers at some point throughout the year. Protected urea is a relatively new product. It's a urea-based nitrogen, so it's the same as urea in terms of its nitrogen. However, the protection removes the risk of ammonia loss. Ammonia loss is nitrogen loss, and we have national targets to reduce those losses, and hence the development of a protected urea, which means that we can use urea all year round, and it has much lower risk of ammonia losses.
Let's get down to very basic terms. How does the Protected Urea product actually work?
Okay, so basically the protection, it can be NBPT, which is a product or an active ingredient that is either melted into the urea granule or coated onto the surface of the urea granule. There are a number of variants of this protection, but they all work. They've all been tested rigorously throughout the world. And basically what this ingredient does is it stops the pH spike around the granule, which when the urea is turning into ammonium, which is the first product that it turns into, which is also plant available, it stops the increase in pH and hence the release of ammonium into the atmosphere. So it acts for up to 10 days around the urea granule, stopping this increase in pH and the release of ammonia. So it's a very simple process as the urea melts.
And based on that kind of treatment or protection on the fertiliser granule, on the urea granule, does that mean that there's a slower response in this type of nitrogen product, or would you see the same response in terms of application and grass growth?
Okay, so it's a very important question because it would affect, if there was a slower response, it would affect how a farmer might spread or apply the timing of the application. In extensive research and trials, we don't see any difference. And the reason being is when a farmer puts out a split of nitrogen fertilizer, the split is put out to last either a grazing round, or if it was for silage, it would last the whole silage growing season, which could be 6 to 8 weeks. So we don't need all the nitrogen to be fully available in day one, and we almost need a drip feed of nitrogen as the grass is uptaking the nitrogen. This is exactly the way the Protected Urea product works. So urea has to be broken down into ammonium number first place, and then that ammonium is further broken down into nitrate over time. So naturally with a urea product, it's drip fed anyway. With the protection, it slows it down that little bit further. So when I say that little bit further, it slows down the drip feed by another 5 to 10 days overall. However, not all the urea and not all that drip feed of nitrogen into the plant available pools is slowed down from day one. So if we're growing at the high season and we're using up to 2.5-3 kilos of nitrogen per day, or 2 to 3 units, if you want to think about it in that respect, there will be plenty of nitrogen coming out from day 1, 2, 3 once the urea granule melts. It just, in the case of Protected Urea, it's not all available within 5 to 10 days, there's a little bit of a delay on the remainder, which is good, especially if it's raining, or especially if you have conditions that are conducive for a lot of ammonia emissions. And those conditions would be very bare soils, so after grazing or after silage, where you get very dry weather and there's drying conditions on the ground. Dry, sunny, windy weather is probably the worst case scenario for ammonia emissions.
And, you talk about those ammonia emissions, and I guess let's compare protected urea to those, standard, typical products we would have used on farms. You talk about urea can, now we have protected urea in the mix. How does protected urea compare to standard urea and can? On a practical basis, the quantity you sprayed, price, is it comparable, David?
Yeah, and for any farmer to use this product, those are the criteria that he or she will want to know. So if we start off with the agronomy, so the potential to grow grass or to produce a silage crop, what we've found in different soil types, different years of testing, we find no yield penalty, or for that matter, we don't find a huge yield advantage. So they're similar. Protected urea performs similar to CAN, which is the standard product used throughout the year. So in terms of the performance, there is no difference. You're not going to take a penalty in terms of yield or production of grass by moving to a protected urea. We do see a slight advantage over urea in terms of nitrogen uptake. So more of that nitrogen fertilizer that you supply as a protected urea is uptaken by the plant. So that's something that we do see. So that potentially over a number of seasons of use could confer into a slight yield advantage over time. In terms of the other criteria, spreadability, etc., for grassland situations, there's no big concerns because the tramline widths or the bout widths in terms of spreading can be closer. With any urea product, very wide spread widths. So when we get above 24 to 30 meter range, urea is less dense, it's less heavy as a granule, and hence it won't travel as far off the veins of the spreader. So that is more of a concern, I would say, for tillage farmers. In terms of price, which is probably one of the big criteria here after agronomy, the price of protected urea is very competitive compared with CAN. So it's coming in, if we take CAN prices currently, it's somewhere between 85 and 90 cent per kilo of nitrogen. Protected urea is coming in about 5 to 10 cent cheaper, somewhere between 75 to 80 cent. And straight urea is the cheapest of them all and coming in currently around 70 cent. So there is a slightly more than urea, but certainly more economical per kilo of nitrogen than a CAN product. So, all in all, I would say protected urea is a good choice. You get good agronomy. It's easy to handle. You can get more acres or more hectares on the farm spread with one fertilizer spreader because it's a 46% nitrogen product, the same as urea. And you get advantages or economies in terms of price.
And in the last number of years, David, the conversation around sustainable farming and reducing our emissions has, become, more on topic. From an emissions perspective, what does protected urea offer in comparison with urea and CAN? Like you've mentioned ammonia already, but can you quantify the reduction in emissions compared to the traditional products?
Okay, so in terms of that environment, in terms of that gaseous emissions area that we hear so much about in the media and in the news, protected urea provides, I suppose, two win-wins or two benefits. One, in terms of protected urea versus urea, gives us an advantage in terms of ammonia and ammonia emissions. So protected urea has much lower ammonia emissions than a urea product. And in terms of greenhouse gases, which is the most potent greenhouse gas, I suppose, is your nitrous oxide. It gives an advantage over calcium ammonium nitrate, over CAN in terms of a greenhouse gas. So in terms of both situations, protected urea reduces ammonia emissions compared with urea by about 70 to 75%. And in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, specifically nitrous oxide emissions, compared with CAN, by about 78%. So again, you're keeping more nitrogen on the ground. You're putting nitrogen that you've bought in a fertilizer product into the soil, where if you're using a protected urea, more of that is available to grow grass.
And then if we think about the fertiliser plan for a farm for the year, be it dairy, beef, sheep, and even, I guess, looking into tillage farms, but I suppose we're specifically talking about dairying today. Is protected urea a product that you can use across the entire season?
Yes, it's that product that, in terms of the different fertilizers that you might have on your farm, you'll have your compound fertilizers and you'll have your straight nitrogen fertilizers, or even nitrogen plus sulfur type products. Protected urea can fill that gap or that void in terms of those straight nitrogen or nitrogen plus sulfur type products that you would have in the yard. So it's a replacement for both urea in the early part of the season, or some that are using urea all year round. And it confers the advantage that it can be used even in the dry weather, when most farmers will have concerns about using straight urea if they don't get some rainfall and the losses. In terms of a substitute for CAN and CAN 27% N type products, protected urea can be substituted in for those products mid season from April onwards in the season, without any penalties in terms of yield. If anything, slight yield and uptake advantages. So it simplifies the fertilizer programs in the yard. So you might have your compounds, your 18612 type compounds in the yard, and your straight nitrogen or nitrogen plus sulfur as a protected urea type product. And perfect for a dairy farm. What I will say is it reduces the amount of calibration of the fertilizer spreader, because if there's a lot of straight nitrogen being spread on the farm, you're not jumping from one type of product early in the season to another product later in the season. You calibrate your fertilizer spreader for your protected urea, and that allows you to spread throughout the season with the one product.
Yeah, and I guess, as you say, that simplifies things on farms and reduces, error over or under application of nitrogen. Just coming back to a point you mentioned, compounds, and is there products available to have protected urea in combination with PK? You have mentioned it is available with sulfur, and how compatible would they be, say your protected urea with those other compounds that we normally spread on farms?
Okay, so again, another very practical question here for farmers to be aware of. The protected urea products that are approved can come as a compound, but not with phosphorus. So Currently, the protection, the NBPT, or other variations of that are not compatible with phosphorus when stored in a bag. So it's the acidity, to explain, it's the acidity in the phosphorus that actually degrades the protection over time when it's sitting in the bag of fertilizer. So what the manufacturers have developed is straight protected urea, 46% N, and then there's a number of products that are slightly less percentage N, so a 38% N plus sulfur, and then you can get protected urea plus sulfur plus potash, so an NKS product as well, but you won't get an NPKS product because the phosphorus is not compatible. So there is options out there. The NK products are very good for later on in the year, especially on paddocks where there has been offtakes of silage bales, etc., and you want to replenish the potash or the potassium that's been taken off in that silage cut with an NK type product. So there's a number of options out there, and those options are all available on the Teagasc website. So we have a list of products, approved protected urea products that are on the Teagasc website, or contact your local advisor and they will get the list of products for you.
And that's an interesting point, David, and we can attach them in the episode notes so that people can link into it there. And as you say, the Teagasc advisor is always available to help with it too. I suppose the last point in terms of, the compounds or the nutrients that farmers are working on within their soils would be lime. And I guess, what is the guidance or advice on spreading lime in combination with protected urea? What works best?
Many farmers will know and have experience, I suppose, over the years of lime with urea type products, and it has been a no-no, I suppose, up to now. So when you spread urea after spreading lime, there's potential there to increase the nitrogen loss as an ammonia emission. So you're going to lose more of your nitrogen. With the protection, as I've said, this protection stops the pH increase around the granule, and from our initial work, it also works where lime has been applied. So it takes away that risk there. We can go ahead and lime as normal, or as we would if we were in a can fertilizer situation. There's less risk there of nitrogen loss, and there is further research being conducted currently in that subject in terms of how compatible lime and protected urea are. But in our initial studies, the active is working. It does what it says on the tin, so to speak, where lime has been applied. So what we're recommending currently is that you go ahead, get that lime out. It's really, really important as the foundation to soil fertility and to good nitrogen use efficiency by adjusting your pH. And after, after the likes of protected urea as a technology to reduce emissions, liming is also up there to increase nitrogen use efficiency. So the two can go hand in hand, and without any risk in terms of losing your nitrogen and your investment.
And David, from the outset, you have identified that protected urea is a relatively new product, but I guess generally when we have this conversation, it's as a result of results, and like a comprehensive amount of research has been done in Teagasc, I guess particularly at Johnstown Castle. But it's been on the market for a few years now. Have you any indication of the level of uptake of protected urea at farm level? Is it being used on farm?
Yes, and this is a very, I suppose, topical question, because we need to increase the usage nationally to help meet our environmental targets in terms of emissions reductions, but also to take the pressure off there in terms of the agricultural sector in that respect, and to increase nitrogen use efficiency overall. So currently what we see is the research came, I suppose, 3 or 4 years ago, where the first research results were out. These protected products have been available by the manufacturers for decades before that. However, I suppose weren't pushed out commercially for a long time. So there's been a lot of testing done on these products, both at manufacturing level, but also research level. In Ireland, we have the products probably for the last 5 years commercially. Initially, there was low uptake, and once the research results have come to the fore, and I suppose farmers and agronomists and advisors can have confidence that they have their own data or national data to pull from and to consult, the usage has gone up. So we're currently somewhere in the region of 10% of the straight-in market is now a protected urea product. We hope in 2021 that will jump again to command more of the market. And that's really, really necessary to meet our targets environmentally and to take the pressure off agriculture as a sector in terms of, its responsibility to reduce nitrogen losses and emissions for Ireland in general. So what I would say is, if there's farmers listening, haven't maybe tried it or haven't dipped their toe in the water in terms of protected urea, maybe purchase a pallet this year, test it on a number of paddocks just to see how you get on, and hopefully you can get confidence that this is a good product. It will do what it says on the tin, and it can be seamlessly integrated into your fertiliser program without any major disruption to your farming operation and what you're used to doing. And I suppose that is a key point here. If we don't realise protected urea, the other measures to achieve the same end, so to achieve the emissions reductions, etc., are going to be a lot more burdensome for farmers. So this is a straight substitute. We're substituting CAN and urea for a protected product. It does what it says on the tin. However, if we don't pick this option, the other options may be more disruptive. And I suppose it's worth considering.
And David, 10%, like that's, I guess, a really good level of usage based on how new the product is. But I guess, is there a concern out there among some farmers as to why they're not using the product at the moment?
Yes, I think so. I think some of the concerns are, change can be difficult, and you have something that's tried and tested in either urea or a CAN-based product heretofore, and you don't want to move away from what you know. I would say on that front, it has been tested. It's been tested at farm level. It's probably been tested in most local areas now, because there's probably 1 or 2 farmers in every local area that have used it or are using it currently. Such is the level of usage. In terms of other concerns, there has been a lot of talk over putting another active into the soil, etc. And that is a concern, as it is with all fertilizers. We must remember that fertilizers are manufactured, and they're chemical fertilizers in their own right, and this is no different in that respect. We have research ongoing to look at those effects. So we have now 7 years of repeated trial areas with protected urea. We've tested the soil biology in those areas, and we see no difference between the soil biology levels in the protected urea plots compared with the areas that have been sprayed with either urea or CAN. So that gives, I suppose, us some comfort to know that this protected urea product is a safe product. It's registered by the EU Commission, and we know that the EU Commission, goes through a very rigorous process in terms of what it lets into the market and what it approves. So I'd say all in all, we have a tried and tested product. It is safe, and it does what it says on the tin. So hopefully that gives farmers some confidence to at least dip their toe in the water in terms of 2021 and try some of the product.
Yeah, and you say confidence, David, and I would say as well, it's really nice to have this conversation today and gain, a greater understanding. And I think you've really broken it down into the simplest terms that we can really understand how protected urea actually works and the similarity in terms of the efficacy of the product when we compare it to what we're used to using. And, as you say, it grows the same amount of grass, across rigorous testing. And also it's competitive in terms of the pricing. So slightly more expensive than urea, slightly cheaper than CAN. And also then we have this added win in terms of the ability to reduce the emissions, whether it's the ammonia or greenhouse gas emissions, which is going to be imperative as we move forward, across all farms in the country and deal with regulation. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Emma.
That's it for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast, and my thanks to David Wall for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify, and for more information go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Emma-Louise Coffey, and join me next time for your Dairy Edge.